In 2021, a man serving life in prison put it in writing. He said he took a teenage girl off the road and killed her. Her name was Jeannette DePalma. He had been confessing to old murders for years by then. Investigators had the letter. They forwarded on. And then in public, nothing happened. No charge, no statement, no answer. Jeannette had vanished 49 years earlier, in the summer of 1972. She was 16 6 weeks after she walked out her front door. A dog carried a human bone home in its mouth. And the investigation into who killed her did not fall apart because the police were lazy. It fell apart because half the town decided she had been sacrificed to the devil. Jeannette Christine DePalma was 16 years old in the summer of 1972. She lived with her family in Springfield Township, a quiet suburb in Union County, New Jersey, the kind of place where the woods started a few streets back from the houses. By all the accounts that survive, she was an ordinary teenager. She had a cross necklace she wore. She had a purse she carried. Small, specific things. Remember them because they matter later. On Monday, the 7th of August 1972, she left the house. The accounts differ on exactly why. Some say she was walking to a friend's home. Some say she meant to hitchhike, the way a lot of kids did in 1972 without thinking twice about it. She made a phone call to that friend to say she was on her way. She stepped out of her front door into an ordinary August afternoon, and no one who knew her ever saw her alive again. For 6 weeks, Jeannette was simply a missing girl. Her family reported it. Police took the report. But in 1972, a teenager who might have been hitchhiking was not treated as an emergency. There was no Amber Alert. There was no national database. There was a phone, a few officers, and a town that kept living its summer. Weeks passed with no sign of her. No ransom call. No sighting that led anywhere. The trail, such as it was, went cold before anyone understood that there was a trail at all. And then, in the middle of September, the answer arrived in the strangest way imaginable. Not from a detective, not from a search party, from a dog. A family dog came back to its yard carrying something in its mouth. The people who looked at it realized, with a sick certainty, that it was not an animal bone. It was human, and it had come from somewhere close. The bone led searchers back into the Howdale Quarry, 120 acres of abandoned rock and woodland on the edge of Springfield, and it led them up to the top of a jagged cliff that the local kids had a name for. They called it the Devil's Teeth up there. On the high ground, they found what was left of Jeannette. After 6 weeks in the open, in the August heat, the remains were skeletal, badly decomposed. There was very little for a medical examiner to read. Cause of death could not be established. Not by strangulation, not by a blow, not by a weapon. No murder weapon was ever identified at that scene, and to this day none has been. The single most basic question, how did this girl die, had no answer the science could give. But there was something else on that cliff. Something that the men standing around the body began to describe. And the way they described it would decide everything that happened next. What the early reports said was this, that the body had been found inside a coffin shape made of logs and branches, that there were crosses arranged around her, that this was not a place where a girl had been dumped. This was a place where something had been done. It was 1972. The country was in the middle of what people would later call the Satanic Panic. A wave of fear that secret cults were operating in ordinary American towns, sacrificing the innocent. A dead teenage girl on a cliff called the Devil's Teeth fit that fear perfectly. The newspapers ran with it. Witchcraft, ritual, the occult, and inside the investigation. Detectives did something that, looking back, is hard to believe a homicide unit ever did. They started chasing the coven. There are accounts that the police consulted a self-described witch to help them read the scene. The question stopped being who had a reason to hurt Jeannette. The question became which dark group had claimed her. And those are not the same investigation at all. Here is the cost of chasing a coven instead of a killer. While the headlines argued about devil worship, the ordinary, unglamorous work of a homicide case was not getting done the way it should have been. There were real people to look at. A former boyfriend, a man who watched over the quarry, a drifter said to be in the area. The kinds of leads a death investigation is supposed to run all the way to the ground, one at a time, until something holds or everything is cleared. But a case wrapped in witchcraft headlines is a case that struggles to be taken seriously. Tips get filtered through the lens of the supernatural. Evidence competes with legend. And the longer the occult story ran, the more the actual human solvable crimes slipped out of focus. Months turned into years. The leads went quiet. No one was charged. And somewhere in those years, a far simpler explanation for what was on that cliff had been sitting in plain sight the entire time, waiting for someone to actually look. And then the case got worse in a way almost no cold case ever does. The evidence itself disappeared. In 1999, Hurricane Floyd swept up the East Coast and flooded huge parts of New Jersey. According to the Springfield police, the original DePalma case files, the reports, the notes, the records that any future detective would need to ever solve this, were stored somewhere the water reached, and they were destroyed. Think about what that means. A homicide that was already half buried under rumor now had its paper trail washed away. For years, that was the story. The answers were gone, lost to a flood, unrecoverable. The Girl on the Devil's Teeth was a case that could no longer even be read. Except that was not the end of it, because decades later, copies of those files would surface anyway, from a place no one had thought to ask. And when investigators finally pulled the real crime scene photographs out of that archive, the entire occult story was about to collapse. The recovered photographs came from the Union County Prosecutor's office, and they were examined by the people who had spent more time on this case than anyone alive. The writers behind Weird NJ, the magazine and the book that had chronicled Jeannette's story for years. And here is what the actual 1972 crime scene photograph showed. No coffin made of logs, no ring of crosses, no altar. None of the witchcraft that had defined this case for half a century was anywhere in the frame. The occult scene that derailed an entire homicide investigation, the coven, the ritual, the devil, appears to have been something closer to panic and imagination, layered onto a few branches, and a terrible discovery by a frightened, sensational time. And there was a detail in the record that pointed somewhere far more ordinary and far darker than Satan. Jeannette's cross necklace was gone. Her purse was gone. Not arranged in a ritual. Taken the kind of thing missing when a person is robbed. Strip away the devil, and you are left with a much more familiar kind of horror. A 16-year-old who left home on an August afternoon, who may have been hitchhiking, whose belongings were taken, whose body ended up on a remote cliff miles from where she was last seen. That is the profile of a girl who got into the wrong car. And in 1972, in northern New Jersey, the roads were not safe in a way that the families driving them did not fully understand yet. Because at that exact time, in that exact region, a predator was working those highways and back roads. He picked up women, he picked up girls. And for decades, no one connected him to the cliff called the Devil's Teeth. His name is Richard Cottingham. The press called him the Torso Killer. He is one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, convicted of murdering multiple women across New York and New Jersey in the 1960s and 70s. And in recent years, he has confessed to many more. From prison, an old man now, Cottingham has spent years adding names to his own list. Cold cases, forgotten girls, killings no one had tied to him. Some of those confessions have checked out. Investigators have learned to take what he says seriously and to test it. And in 2021, in written statements to the journalist Jesse P. Pollack, the same writer who helped debunk the witchcraft, Cottingham alluded to Jeannette. To a teenage girl he said he had taken off the road and killed. A girl who fit Jeannette DePalma exactly. After 50 years of devils and floods and dead ends, there was finally a real named living suspect, a man who had already admitted to killing women on those very roads pointing at her. The lead was handed to the prosecutors, and that is where it stopped. Here is what we actually know about what happened next. Cottingham's statements were forwarded to the Union County Prosecutor's office. And then publicly, there has been silence. No public charge against Cottingham in Jeannette's death. No public announcement that he was cleared. No statement closing the loop one way or the other. For a case that old, with a suspect that notorious, the absence of any resolution is its own kind of answer. Maybe his claim could not be corroborated. With the original files reportedly destroyed in the flood, the evidence needed to confirm or destroy his story may simply not exist anymore. A confession is not proof, and a serial killer adding a name to his list is not the same as a case being solved. So the lead that should have been an ending became one more thing left hanging over the devil's teeth. A killer who points at her, a prosecutor's office that has not said yes and has not said no, and a family that, 50 years on, has still never been told what happened to their girl. There is one thread that refuses to die, and it is the reason this case is not completely closed in the dark. The files were not as gone as everyone believed. In 2024, the chroniclers at Weird NJ obtained copies of the case material from the Union County Prosecutor, the same office holding the Cottingham lead. The flood took the originals in Springfield. It did not take every copy that existed elsewhere, and that single fact changes what this case is. It means the photographs that debunked the witchcraft survived. It means there may be more in those pages than anyone has finished reading. A case that was supposed to be unsolvable because the paper was destroyed turns out to still have paper. So here is where the girl on the devil's teeth actually stands, 50 years on. The cause of her death has never been determined. No weapon was ever found. The satanic ritual that consumed the investigation was never real. The one lead that could end it, a serial killer who put it in writing that he took a girl off the road, a man who has been right before, sits with a prosecutor's office that has said nothing. And the files everyone thought the flood had erased are sitting in a box, partly read. Jeannette DePalma was 16. She walked out her front door on an ordinary August afternoon, and the thing that has kept her killer hidden for half a century was never witchcraft. It was a rumor that ate the truth, a flood that took the proof, and a question nobody in power has been willing to answer out loud. She is still up there in every sense that matters. On the cliff the kids named for the devil, waiting for someone, with the files now back on the table, to finally say her name and mean it. Unsolved.